We Christians talk about Jesus being perfect, and we see him as being infinitely more perfect than any other human being is capable of being. Would you agree? But a lot depends on how we measure that perfection. Is it perfect obedience to the many rules of the Old Testament? That's a very long list. But most of those rules are about things that many of us don't do anyway, and others require achievable effort. Don't eat a bunch of different things, make various sacrifices, attend certain festivals. Would it really be so impossible to accomplish perfect obedience, at least for a limited period of time, to those various laws? And if someone could do it for even one day, why not for a whole week, or a month, or a year? In practice, however, I think most Christians at least pick up instinctively that true perfection would be more than just outward physical disciplines in response to objective physical rules. But what about the spirit of the law? It's the spirit of the law that Jesus preached. And that is where perfection gets far more obviously impossible. Don't kill is relatively easy, as long as no one is threatening our lives or the lives of our loved ones. But what about don't be angry, or don't be lustful, or greedy, or impatient, or lazy? See, when you bring those qualities into the equation, it becomes impossible to even imagine how it would look for Jesus or anyone else to perfectly reflect all of the good qualities that we instinctively link with spiritual perfection. What does perfect patience look like? And would it contradict things like courage to speak the truth? The same problem arises when we talk about Jesus being God, all powerful, all knowing, all loving. How does that fit with Bible verses that say things like, he learned obedience through the things that he suffered? How supernatural was Jesus as a baby and as a child? Did he know everything from the day he was born? And what about passages where, as an adult, he says things like, I don't know when I'll return? His humanity seemed to poke through when he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he chased the merchants out of the temple, or even just the many times that he expressed frustration at not being able to get basic truths through to his closest friends. Then Jesus has the audacity to tell us, be perfect, even as my heavenly Father is perfect. Seriously? We're supposed to be as perfect as God? Now, I've heard that the Greek understanding of perfection is quite different to the Hebrew understanding. In English, which borrowed from the Greek, we tend more toward thinking of something that is quite unimaginable in the real world. Infinite perfection in every microscopic detail. So, what would a perfectly humble person look like? Or how hard would a person work who is never guilty of being lazy? We would need to start with perfect wisdom about how far to push any of these qualities before they might impinge on some other virtue. The Hebrew word for perfection might be more correctly translated as just being sincerely committed to growth toward a purely theoretical perfection. We can even imagine God Himself working on various plans to train us, with some attempts working better than others. Now, while the theologians demand that God must be immutable, that is, incapable of making a mistake and learning from it, we read in the Bible that God actually repented for having created humans in the first place. Consequently, He sent a great flood to destroy almost all life on the planet. We also read later that He suffered such remorse from that decision that He sent a rainbow as a reminder, maybe to Himself, that He will never do that again. Even God's love for us suggests that He needs something. He needs and wants someone to trust Him. This has led to His willingness to literally die for such rare people. I think husbands and leaders can relate to that, although there is a lot more reason for people to trust God than to trust us. The incarnation of Jesus itself suggests that God wanted to better understand what it is like to be human, struggling with all the temptations that we face each day, and On the basis of this, God arrived at a plan of salvation which takes into account our spiritual frailties. It is a plan that requires trust in God's grace, at the same time that it requires obedience to what God has demanded. We do not need to be perfect, but we do need to try to be perfect. And as we do, we can trust that God will forgive our many shortcomings along the way. Jesus is quite serious when he asks us to aim for perfection, and serious about the need to take extreme steps toward achieving that perfection. But he is also quite serious in telling us that he will continue to forgive us as we continue to keep trying. Religious people seem to get sucked into preaching one side to the exclusion of the other in many areas of doctrine, and it ends up generating more heat than light. Whereas it makes sense that God would be most perfectly forgiving towards those of us who are trying hard to obey him, even if we keep falling short. In other words, he has perfect grace, in quotes, towards the triers, but not for those who want forgiveness without any effort to change. Can you see the good sense in that? It doesn't leave room for self-righteousness on the part of the triers, because we have to confess our imperfections in order to get forgiveness. But it requires effort from those who are not trying at the moment. If we don't have enough faith in Jesus to at least try to obey him, we don't get salvation. I'll end it here and wait for your comments below. Thank you to those of you who are making this more of a two-way relationship by expressing your thoughts here. God bless you, and thank you for listening.